How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. I've had a really amazing day. I had a Zoom call with Steve McQueen himself, and we
Ooh,
finally had a chance to catch up because I haven't had a chance to talk with him since seeing him on the set in 2019. So it was good to sort of wrap with him before we got involved with the Zoom call. So yeah, it was really good. We were doing a media interview with the Hollywood Reporter, I think it was called.
nice, nice. Are you ready to get started?
Yep, anytime you're ready.
Great. So my first question for you is that you left a career in science in order to become a police officer. At what moment did you realize that you wanted to join the force?
Well, it caught me in a bit of a blind side, if you say, yeah. It basically caught me by total surprise in that I was a scientist, as you say. My career path was identified, clearly stated. I was thinking of going into medicine, which my father really wanted me to do. And I was working at the Royal Free Hospital, carrying out that process. And I started to speak to some guys who I didn't know they were police officers. They were from, because where I was working at the Royal Free Hospital is in a part of London called Hampstead. And that part is very nice area, very affluent area. And the local officers from Hampstead Police Station used to use our facilities, that, our bar and the gym and the swimming pool. And I got to know them before I found out they were cops. And so I saw the human side of them, which really sort of upset a lot of my own assumptions and stereotypes, because I grew up in London in the 60s and 70s, which it was very draconian, the policing in that time. It was known as the sus law, and it's suspicion that you're about to commit a very major offense, or arrestable offense, as we called it then. And as a result of that, I said, well, okay, it doesn't mean that everyone in the police service is bad. And I, got to know them. They took me on some drive rounds. So I was in the back of the car while they went on patrol and answering calls and responding to incidences. And I thought, wow, pretty cool job. And at the same time, I was getting my appraisal for my time in the Royal Free. My boss said to me, Leroy, I don't see you being in a lab for the next 30, 40 years. So I said, well, what do you think I should do? He said, well, I think you're an outgoing person. You should do a job like policing. I thought, wow, do I look like a racist to you? Because that's how I felt, wow. It caught me by surprise. And I was thinking maybe he saw me in the back of the police car with these guys from the local police station. And I thought, wow, this is strange. And it sort of played on my mind. And then my fiance at the time, who was still my wife, fortunately, Gretel, I said to her, Gretel, this strange thing. My boss is saying I should join the cops. These police officers are befriending me. And there was a bit of a recruitment drive for Black and minority ethnic people to join the police at that time. And she said, well, why don't you try it? Because she didn't grow up in London, so she didn't know a lot of the systemic failures, the institutional racism. She came from Nigeria, and she didn't really understand the dynamics around institutional racism in those days in 1982. So I said, oh, okay. So I then start to apply, but I didn't tell my parents, and in particular my dad. He was really, I know he'd be really upset with me. And unfortunately, he found out the wrong way. he found out that I was joining when officers went round to the house where I used to live, because I'd then moved out with Gretel, and they said to my dad that I was joining the police, and he thought, what? And it was only a few weeks after he'd been beaten up by police over a traffic matter. And so he was so upset. One, because I was joining the ranks of officers who beat him up. And two, because I was moving away from science and going into law enforcement. So for him, it was a double whammy. But I stuck with the vision of wanting to join, to make a difference from within the organization. And fortunately, I was able to do that.
And you wrote an autobiography. At what moment did you realize it was time to share your story?
Well, that really hit me in 2010. I literally had the last 3 years of my service, because I retired in 2013, and I knew that I wasn't going to do more than 30 years. I was doing a lot of the safety and security of the 2012 games, so I was part of that national security team, and the London 2012 games was the vision. But I started to formulate my thoughts, how I wanted the book to really have an impact. But like great, you have all these plans, but they don't quite happen the way you think it will. And then I put it to one side, and then I'd start again, and it just didn't feel right. But the time when it really resonated was through my work with Steve McQueen, when I was approached by part of his team to record my story. And I finally met Steve in 2016, excuse me. And he sort of said, well, I love your story. I need to know why you joined. Even you say you love your dad, but he still joined, even though he'd been beaten up by cops. And why would you do that if you really loved him? And he really emphasized it in a way that I thought, wow, this is where my book, my autobiography should go. It should be a journey, a spiritual journey, highlighting the relationships I've had, in particular with my father. And yeah, it sort of took on a life of its own. It sort of was in parallel with the film Red, White and Blue. And that's why I launched my book a couple of months before Red, White and Blue was shown on BBC here in the UK and on Amazon Prime over in the US. And it seems to have, it's resonated so well. I think there's a bit of divine intervention there. I couldn't have planned it myself, even if I tried. So I've got to be thankful to God that he's really given me that strength and fortitude to really apply myself against the odds, to not only get through 30 years, but to be a community activist and advocate, and to make sure that my story is told, because it seems to be current. It's resonating with Red, White and Blue, and the whole Black Lives Matter issue. And of course, the issues with George Floyd, because remember the way in which that, for me, he was publicly lynched. And as a result of that, it hurts me even more, because that officer swore a similar oath to myself to protect and serve. So for me, that was really important for me to show solidarity with Black Lives Matter. And I went on one of their marches in June over here in London. And it was the same day that John Boyega spoke up dramatically and so passionately about the issues over here in London. So it made it so complete. And, as I said, it's beyond my wildest dreams.
And with the Black Lives Matter movement, 2020 has been a pretty painful year for Black folks here in the United States. And as a nation, we're having a pretty difficult conversation about systemic racism and police brutality and mass incarceration. Do you think that sharing your story will help build that diasporic bridge between Black folks here in the States and Black folks over in the UK?
I would like to think so, because I through the years, as a member of the Black Police Association, I've linked with the National Black Police Association over there in the US, the National Association of Black Law Enforcers, NOBLE, over in the US. So I've already done a lot of work over there. So I would like to think that it will resonate with not only law enforcement officers, but the wider public. I would like to think that it can still identify with policing, being a Bobby after all, and a Bobby on the beat, and a Black one at that. They can see that interest factor. And again, it will show that the issues over in the US are very similar to what we have over here in the UK. Maybe we don't have the amount of shootings because we don't have guns. It's not in our culture. It's not part of the Constitution to bear arms lawfully. And as a result of that, we don't have officers patrolling on with sidearms either. You can call on them, but they're not regularly walking in foot patrol with sidearms like you have in the US. So, yeah, but there's still some themes around systemic failures, institutional racism, and how it impacts within the organization and how it impacts the Black community in particular. So I would like to think the conversation through the book and the film will help to really get to terms with this. And one of the things that's really encouraged me is the generation of young people are really picking up this work. You know, I'm so reassured that young people are not going to let this slow down. They're going to keep the momentum up, and they're young people of all backgrounds. You know, that's really makes me so encouraged that the different backgrounds of people. I mean, I'm an avid American news TV addict, so I'm watching it and seeing so many different young people, backgrounds, protesting and speaking truth to power.
And now getting into the film Red, White, and Blue, viewers will see the characters, especially the character of Leroy, which is played by John Boyega, struggle with not just being respected by his fellow officers, but also struggle with being respected by other Black people. How did you get through those difficult moments?
Do you know, I didn't realize how much it had an impact on me, because, you know, sometimes you just move on and you think, wow, I've done my 30 years, but I didn't realize how much it had impacted on me. And I think it was those moments when John was left on his own. You know, there was a time when he was talking to a young man to say, listen, you know, my best friend Lee John from Imagination, he can help you with music. And the young man walked away from him and he was just sitting there. And then there was a time when he was just looking at his uniform, or first time he wore his uniform, he was looking at himself, and he just, those silent moments. And when someone said they're going to leave the police, and he said, "Oh, you're going to leave me?" You know, that sort of thing. Those silent moments, I didn't realize how much they impacted me. And I must admit, there was quite tearful at times when I reflected on it. So it's been very surreal, but it's been very cathartic. You know, I don't know if you remember the track from Maze, Joy and Pain, like sunshine and rain. So I've been getting a lot of sunshine and rain, but the rainbow's been there to say there is that restoration, there's that healing. And, you know, it's been really amazing, the emotional process I've been going through. And not just only for myself, my family, my wife and children, and, you know, my friends, including Lee, who's featured in the film as well, and also my autobiography. So it's I didn't think I'd be going through this sort of process at this stage of my life, but you know, I really like to think it's a springboard for great things in the years to come.
And what was it like being able to watch John Boyega take on showing your story to the world?
Well, because I knew John, I actually knew John from 2010. Actually 2010, yeah, something like that. When he his first film, Attack on the Block, and that's the film that made him over here in the UK. And maybe not as far back as 2010, but I remember taking my son Miles to the castings because my son was actually applying for that same job for the lead role, but John won. I mean, I saw him in his youth, but he was very professional even then, from drama school, where my son was just responding to an advert in the newspaper. So, you know, I knew him from then. And then the sort of high profile investigation I was involved in around the death of a young man called Damilola Taylor. And John and his sister were one of the last people to see Damilola before he got killed in that sort of black, you know, not youngster and youngster attack. So the different backgrounds. And anyway, so I was involved in that investigation to find the suspects, and eventually they got convicted. So I'd already got interaction with him, and obviously I saw him at the Black Lives Matter movement. So it was like, he was just the natural person to do my role justice. And to be quite honest, I was so impressed with his attitude. When I met him before filming took place, he was just on point. And when I went to see him on set, and all the details that they actually took to make sure the numbers on my tunic was the right numbers, or, you know, even the type of building they found to recreate different venues. It was so authentic. Literally, I was in a deja vu moment time and time again throughout the whole movie in the 80s, you know, because it really was authentic. And it just shows you that when people who know their craft and they really know, got an eye for detail, and, you know, being honest to the narrative, you just can't really say enough for it. And as I said, John and Steve McQueen are the A team as far as I'm concerned, and just to be part of that process, to be part of that family has been great. And even early today, I was on a Zoom call with Steve McQueen, and it's just so natural to speak with him. I've never felt there was any sort of inertia or hesitance. We just rap, you know. It's just really good just to feel like a kindred spirit type thing.
And with your life story being turned into a film, what was the greatest challenge with watching your life on screen?
Well, when they originally started the script, I was told they weren't going to use my name. So when I went on set and I saw the script and they were saying Leroy said and Lee John said, I thought, wow. I said, "You using my name?" And they said, "Yeah, we're using your name." I said, "Wow." So that was a massive impact, and that was only late 2019. So I had to sort of come to terms with that, but I knew that would take it to another level. And to see your life being narrated, and I wish my parents was around. God rest their soul. You know, they died almost 20 years ago now, both of them. And I wish they were around to see this. They would have been so proud. But I know in heaven they're checking it out and say, "Yeah, you done good." They've really done us proud. My sister, she's played really well. That quiet, very steady person that she is, and I must admit, it gave me so much pride, and I would like to think that a lot of people can identify with it. I've had so many messages of goodwill. I wish I could reply to all of them. I will eventually, but you know, most of it on social media, I've just been liking them or just retweeting or whatever it needs, just to say I'm acknowledging it, and I really appreciate it, and I just hope it's going to have a similar impact over there in the US.
And with a dialogue about police brutality becoming a global one, what do you hope to see in the near future for the evolution of law enforcement?
Well, you know, I really want to see that ethical leadership at the top to acknowledge that there's systemic failures and not try and undermine people's intelligence, saying there's not a problem. I would like to see the whole narrative around a law on knife crime and law on drugs. It's sometimes counterproductive. So you need to work with communities. You need to acknowledge that there's a problem in the organization, and you're going to do something about it. There needs to be a statement of intent to say, listen, we're not going to allow these systemic failures to continue anymore. We're acknowledging there's a problem, and we're going to be open and transparent how we deal with it. We're going to make sure that those road cops who carry out their powers in a draconian fashion are held to account, and know that there needs to be changes, and not just to undermine people by thinking, oh, you're talking nonsense and whatever. I like to think there's going to be a real more focus about citizen-focused policing, community policing, building relationships and not barriers. So that's how I would want to see things. So the whole look and feel of policing is going to be improved, because for me, the policing, the sense of policing now reminds me of 20 years ago. You know, we've done like 10 steps forward, but it's 5 steps back. So let's get those steps back in line in the right direction to make the changes we all want to see.
And in your book, you discuss how your faith helped you persevere through some hard times and hardship. For young people who might be watching this interview, do you have any advice for them on how to rely on their faith to get through hardship?
Well, you know, I'm a great believer of faith in action. You know, you got to test your faith. You know, it's like you need to have that testimony, and that test, it really will show that God shows up. There were so many times when I thought, no, I can't do this, but my faith kept me confident, strengthened me in the lower times, and so I wasn't able to, you know, give up. And also, God really was so powerful in providing the right sort of people around me to encourage me. I mean, I was 19 when I met my wife, and I did a good choice, because she was one of my greatest confidence. I mean, she a lot of people say she chose me. So, you know, it wasn't just about me choosing her, but she's alongside me all the time to this very day. And she's always testing me, always holding me to account. And that's what you need. You're only as good as the people you're surrounded by. So choose your friends wisely, stick to your purpose. If I believe there's no-go area for activism and advocacy. So whether it's in policing or any other public service or private organization, you need to know that you can stand up and be proud of who you are and don't compromise your beliefs and values, especially, where you get that sort of grounding from your parents and your heritage, because you're going to know where you're coming from. So you've got a clear idea how you're going to go forward and standing firm and not allowing yourself to be derailed by other people's prejudices and personalities. Because if I did that, I wouldn't have lasted 3 weeks in the Met, much less 30 years. Because once you're focused, you will put aside all those things, stand up for yourself at the appropriate time, choose your battles wisely, and understand sometimes your worst nightmare could be your biggest breakthrough. Because some people think, I'm not going to do that. That is crazy. And a lot of people said I was crazy, but I knew I had to step into that organization. You're not going to steer a ship from the shore. You've got to be on board in the captain's cabin to change the direction of that ship. And it's not just about how high you are on the rank, but how much influence you can have. So I'd like to think that everyone can identify with the film Red, White, and Blue, my autobiography, Closing Ranks, and say, yeah, if he can do it, I can do it. I can see it, I can do it as well.
And you have a social justice charity called Voyage. How has your career as a police officer influenced your work in charity?
Well, when we set up Voyage in 2000, the concept, and then we started to deliver our leadership program in 2001, and we've had so many amazing young people who have gone through our program it's called Young Leaders for Safer Cities, and it's an accredited program with the national curriculum over here in the UK. It helps young people from quite deprived backgrounds who think they're going to be a victim of their environment. But a lot of them, once we go through that 100-hour modular process, they can understand that they know their rights and responsibilities, especially with interactions with police, and also how they can develop positive peer-to-peer mentoring so that young people don't get diverted into negative types of behavior, which can end up into gangs and organized crime, etc. And also not become a victim of their environment. They can change their environment. So it's getting them into a mindset that they can be self-empowered to be the change they want to see. So for me, Voyage has been the jewel in the crown in terms of my 30-year career. And even now, I've been the chair for the last 7 years. Having started it, then I went into policing, and then I actually last 9 years, but I've just literally stood down as chair. I'm now the patron, so I'm still involved. But it really has been, one of my greatest achievements, just getting that concept going. And in fact, another thing that's given me a real joy, the current chief executive officer, the CEO of Voyage, he's a young man, but he's still younger than me. He's someone I met in the early 80s when I was a rookie cop, as they call it. When I was a probation constable, he was one of those young people that used to make my life hell. He was always calling me names. He used to call me Judas. He used to call, and I used to say, Officer Judas to you, that sort of thing. And that's actually in the film and in the book. And literally, I didn't react to it. I didn't want to start arresting him because I could understand that I could be saying the same thing if the roles were reversed. So I could really relate to them. And 30 odd years later, we're now working on Voyage together. So Paul Anderson and myself, we go back a long way, and it's really important. And I know he's been taking Voyage from strength to strength. So I will always be involved in helping young people to know what their true potential is, and not just to survive, but to strive and achieve what they want to see.
Absolutely. And my final question for you is, for viewers of the film Red, White, and Blue, but also readers of your autobiography, Closing Ranks, My Life as a Cop, What do you hope they can learn from your experience?
I think do not allow anyone to prevent you from achieving your true potential. Even if you fall flat on your face, that's still progress. Get yourself back up on your feet and, just keep focused. If you know you're on the right track, do not allow people to distract you, derail you in any way. Stay focused, because a lot of people sometimes want to prevent you from doing what you want to do because of envy. I know a lot of people were envious of me sort of taking on this path. And now, which is an amazing thing, they all coming back to me saying, well, great, man. I'm glad you did it. At the time, they were totally against me.
Yeah.
But time, you got to give yourself time. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Sometimes you need to graft, you need to dig deeper than you might expect. But trust me, you can do it. And a lot of people think, when the storm's coming, run away the opposite way. No, sometimes you have to go into the storm. And sometimes when you're in the eye of the storm, that's where the peace is. Even though everything's swirling around you, you're in there to say, right, I can withstand this. I am confident in my abilities. And wherever you find your faith, you get that anchor to ensure the strength in you is of a spiritual understanding, because we're not just human beings in a physiological self. We're a spiritual being, and acknowledge that, and that is where you can get so much peace and resolve and understanding of self, so that you can withstand the storms.